Hi everyone, welcome back to the San Francisco Dog Fest. My name is Lucy Hanna and I am a programmer with the festival. And today I'm so delighted to have a conversation with Charlotte Knowles, the producer and co-director, everything for a very unique film we have in the lineup that I'm very excited about. It's Palestine Comedy Club, and imagine Palestine and comedy in the same sentence. You already read the metaphor, right? Um, Please, Charlotte, introduce yourself and welcome to the festival, and thanks for making this great film.
Thank you so much, Lucy, for having me. I really appreciate it. I'm Charlotte, and I produce Palestine Comedy Club. I co-directed it with Regash Allah Ali Abdallah, as he's known to everybody else, but Regash to us. And there's a long history to Palestine Comedy Club, and I'm super excited to talk to you about it.
I'm very excited about this film. I've heard about the shows that were going on and the comedians trying to, which is something in our culture, in the Middle Eastern culture, which I happen to come from originally, that somehow in the deepest, the small situations, we manage to laugh. Um, I don't know how we do it, but like for me, as I'm Egyptian, we are the most sarcastic creatures in the Middle East, and from misery, we just make jokes and criticize everything through laughter. And I think laughter is an escape, an asylum, a means of coping, and also uh, one of the strongest and most powerful criticism um, tools that can be utilized and to deliver a message way better than lectures and long speeches, and laughter gets through and bypasses a lot of obstacles. Um, Tell me how you ended up making this film. How did you meet the crew? Were you following them? Uh, how can you make such a great film, a very special one, with a completely different mixture of people, on a long time span? How did you know that this is gonna be a good film? How did you know that this is a film? You know, which is always the
Uh,
question for documentaries. Like, how did you know that this is can be something? You know.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you kind of nailed it at the beginning, saying, you don't expect Palestine and comedy to be in the same sentence, especially now. And I think it's something that we've been so conscious of because of when the film is coming out. There is an assumption, a false assumption that maybe the film is in some way laughing at the situation, which could not be further from the truth. The reality is, in terms of how we came about making the film, we didn't really know that's what we were doing at first. So I met Allah Shahade, the co-founder of Palestine Comedy Club, when he was performing in London in 2017, I think it was 2016 maybe. And I had been working in Palestine already for a few years before that, in journalism. And so when you were saying about, how comedy has the ability to cut through in a way that giving a lecture or educating or informing often can't, that was exactly my experience. So I had been working with the Center for Investigative Journalism and had been going out with other investigative journalists to bring about, find footage and take it back to human rights organizations and like uncover human rights abuses and try and have them documented so that they could be, something could happen as a result. And when I saw the comedians performing in London from Palestine, I couldn't believe it because I could see immediately they were doing something that journalism could never really do. It was doing something so different. You were taking this like deep dive into somebody's lived experience, and there was this truth there that as an audience member, you validate it by laughing. You become part of the conversation because you're laughing, you're reacting. In some cases, you're shouting out if you're a heckler, right? So people are actively part of it in a way that when you read the newspaper, you just read the newspaper, or you watch the news, you're passive, right? You're not a part of the conversation. And comedy has this unique capacity to help us as people make sense of the world. I think that's why it exists. It's why people tell jokes, to try and process something that has happened to them, often something very bad and troubling and often traumatizing that has happened to them. People will make jokes about it as a way of trying to process it, as a way of trying to talk about it, trying to converse with other people about it. So immediately I thought this was such an amazing thing that they were doing. And when Allah told me about his idea that he wanted to take it much further, he didn't want to use comedy as just a way of talking to British people or Americans or Europeans, because it is a north, like a device from the global north, right, of storytelling. He wanted to use it in Palestine to talk to other Palestinians. And that really I found fascinating because, of course, Palestine is so divided and by occupation. So it's very difficult for communities to connect with one another meaningfully because there are checkpoints between them and there are times that they can go there and times that they can't. And it's everything is controlled, movement is controlled. And in the UK, we say it, the landmass is about the size of Wales. But in the States, I think it would be the state of Delaware. I understand is about the same size of, right? So just to kind of, I think it's important to remember that because we're talking about a small landmass and it's so hard for people to connect. So the fact that in this tiny landmass, you've got such different cultures that then emerge, right? Because of the fact that people are so divided from one another. When he told me he wanted to do this project to try and connect people together and use comedy as a way of getting to know people, I thought it was amazing. But we didn't know we were making a film at that point. The film came later when, after a few years of doing workshops and exploring different ways of doing stand up with different communities and then finding different performers, then the idea of them doing a show came about. And once that came up, I thought, okay, that this could be a potentially really interesting story to tell on film. But even then, when we started filming, we had no idea where the story was going to go. We thought the film had ended when, you know, they did the shows, they toured, they, you know, they were very, very popular. Loads of people were coming to see them perform. They started to get more popular online and people wanted them to come and perform in London. They traveled to London and they arrive in London, as you see in the film, on October 7th. Um, and that was completely unexpected. What happened from that point onwards, we could never have anticipated it. And we thought that was going to be the end of the film. In some ways, it was just the beginning, you know? And so, in terms of what we thought the film was going to be and what it ended up being, that, you know, I think with documentary, you never really know where it's going to go, but we really did not know where this was going to go, you know. And in a way, you could never, we could never have pitched this to a commissioner or something like this, you know, that this story, we just had no concept that it was going to go where it went, and we just had to keep filming, and just as long as the comedians were doing it and they were happy, we were going to keep telling the story. And so that's how it evolved, really kind of quite unexpectedly.
Oh, that's very interesting. I mean, in a very dynamic environment, and it's not dynamic in the positive way, unfortunately. See, I'm even laughing, it's just part of my DNA.
Yeah.
It's quite a dynamic situation where there's no other day like the other. You cannot really predict what's going on. You made the choice, and I think maybe it wasn't a choice, it was how things were just cut out. It's a road trip film.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think I can see the metaphor in the road trip because it's not like a smooth, happy road trip film. It's a blocked road. It's every 5 minutes there's a checkpoint. And I feel the metaphor cinematically here, which I think just naturally presented itself, is like these people are trying to survive their very tough road through laughter. Speaking of roads, these people traveled to the UK and they travel in turn. I think it's easier to get to the UK once you're outside than actually moving from Haifa to Jenin or right. Tell me more about the obstacles you had moving from one point to another while making this film. Like, did you meet any like real trouble? in the
Mm.
way that got in the way. Like things were like, we're getting into some serious shit is going on here.
Yeah. Well, do you know what? You kind of nailed it again because it was quite difficult to know how much trouble we were in because of the fact that everybody made jokes about it all the time. So every day, even the we knew we were going to have to cross a big checkpoint to get to Haifa from the West Bank, and that was going to be really challenging. And you can't make that journey if you don't have all of the necessary biometric cards and passes and everything else. And some of our members and some of the team that we were following didn't. So they had applied for emergency medical passes in order to get through the checkpoint because you can do that for a certain number of hours. But we knew that they were going to be there for days. So, that was going to be a struggle for them because once they were there, they were at risk of arrest at any moment. But even just the day before this, they were joking about the fact that, oh, let's see how well you limp, to make sure that it looks really believable that you are going to the hospital, right, to sort out your leg or your back or like, and it was all just like a constant joke, not because it was funny, but because, as you point out, you make light of these kinds of situations to help you deal with them.
Or will not
um
if we take it that serious. Like you're not gonna make it to the next day if you take it really serious.
Right, exactly. But as an outsider who doesn't fully understand what's going on myself, it was very difficult to know how much danger we were in because, we often didn't know until we were there. Oh, that's what the implication is. Oh my goodness. So when we did get through the checkpoint, thank goodness, and it was hours we were at this checkpoint waiting for them, and we got through and everything was fine and they were able to go and do the shows. And then, ironically, one of them did get sick. Of course, their medical pass is long expired by this point, so they can't go to a hospital. They had to get medical treatment elsewhere. They still went on and performed that night, despite the fact that they had kidney stones, which is extremely painful. Um, but this was on the one hand the kind of level of danger, and on the other hand, and the level of inhumanity as well, to think that in any nation you could have somebody with kidney stones and they're so terrified to go to the hospital because they'll be arrested that they wouldn't get that kind of desperate care. um, and instead they go on stage and they perform because of their commitment to being there for the audience, sharing their story with the audience. And that was an ongoing theme, that whatever the stakes were, they were still going to get there and they were still going to perform. That was so important for them to do that, to continue that work of connecting with their people, like uniting around this storytelling and keeping the journey moving. As you say, once they go to the UK, fine, they're easy. Moving around is easy. But in Palestine, particularly moving even within the West Bank, but certainly between the West Bank and Haifa, Nazareth, Jerusalem, all of these places, is extremely difficult. And now, I mean, when we were there, I think we noted that there were, I think, 167 obstacles, like 167 either checkpoints or some other thing, which again, imagine a landmass the size of Delaware, right? 167 points that you can't cross until you give paperwork. It would be unthinkable for you to have to do that at so many stages in your journey across a small landmass. Now it's like 3 or 4 times that number. It's impossible. There is one road in to a town and there is one road out, and you cannot go anywhere else. Like everything is so micro controlled now. I think my daughter's trying to come in.
We're
What about you?
making the CNN famous moment
Yeah, I
here.
know.
Right? Hi.
No. Robert, do you want to go downstairs while Mummy finishes her interview? Could you go downstairs, do you think? Maybe. Thank you.
Hello.
You go downstairs and I'll see you in a minute.
Charlotte told me to say the Bible to you.
Oh, that's very nice. Thank you. All right, I'll see you in a bit. You'll shut the door.
I'll just go say my Bible.
Thank you, Angel. Thank
And
you.
you got your CNN moment. I just imagined this
Yeah.
happening. Law of attraction. I summoned this to happen.
Yeah, exactly.
So, of course, I appreciate you still not giving up and insisting to go through this very hideous process that is like, welcome, this is a new day in the Middle East, or the, welcome, this is a new day and a new normal business as usual in Palestine, unfortunately. Um, Speaking of them traveling to the UK, initially the jokes, as far as I know, were made to connect Palestinians together through laughter. And I am assuming the jokes were in Arabic. And me, as a Middle Eastern that try to be funny, most of the time when I joke here, it's either gonna land really exceptionally well or people have no idea what I'm saying, right? They still laugh for the sake of it, though. Translating jokes to the outside world and trying to, because those are not like random jokes, those are jokes that carry heavy messages there.
Mm.
The journey of translating those jokes in a way that makes the foreign audience or the outside world get to under how hard was that to
Mm.
connect those completely step, because part of the jokes is like cultural references that no one would, it can be a film from 1920 that no one watches other than the people of this specific country, you know, but still laugh at, like, how did you guys manage that cultural shift to still give the exact same emotional
Mm.
impact of the joke to completely foreigners?
I think this really interesting because there's a few things going on with it. First of all, the jokes are when they're performing in Arabic in Palestine, they are performing, they know they're performing for Palestinians. So they are telling jokes and the context is all within their own community. So when they do that, they are, it's really difficult to, you can't translate it too much, but you basically, we talked about translating it into English and then translating it into funny. So inside of the way that you would translate poetry, right? Like you translate it so it makes sense, but then you also have to translate it so it rhymes or it has the same kind of rhythm or lyricism to it. So in the same way, we had to kind of translate it twice to try and find a way, like how is this going to register? How are they going to understand it? And in some cases that was possible. And in some cases it just wasn't. Like, so for example, Diana makes a joke about where she lives. And the joke is that she lives in this tiny little place that you would never have heard of. So like, and so she says, the place I live is between El Sitcha and Al Chum, which is like this tiny place you've never heard of and this other tiny place you've never heard of. My tiny place you've never heard of is between those two places, right? That's the joke. Except if you're not from those places, you have no idea what she's talking about, right? So I could translate it into English and I could give you, you know, two random village names that you've also never heard of, but you can imagine that they exist, and then I live between them. So that kind of thing, we had to, if we were going to keep it in, which we did, we just had to accept that joke is for the Palestinians. The rest of the audience is not going to get it. That's fine. Like that's kind of for the fans, even if you like. And then the performers themselves, when they went to the UK, they now are writing a completely different set. They're never going to perform comedy for the UK audience that they performed for a Palestinian audience. It just wouldn't. They'd miss an opportunity to tell stories that were really relevant to the British. And the British obviously has a very long history of colonialism and is arguably the reason why what we have in
This
Palestine
happened.
now
We are
exists
in the
as, right?
situation we are
It's
in
our
it
fault.
right now. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, for
So
the Accords and
yeah, so there's an opportunity there for them to tell these jokes for this audience, and that's golden, right? So of course they're going to write completely new material. Also, they're writing in English for an English audience. So again, completely different material. So in the film, what I like about it is that often the audiences, and we have had some criticism for it, which I find kind of funny. The jokes at the beginning are not funny, and the jokes at the end are. And I'm like, the jokes at the beginning were not written for you, but the jokes at the end were written for you. That's why they're funny. The jokes at the beginning are funny. They're just not for you. That's why you don't get them. And that's why they're not funny for you. But they are funny for lots of other people. And so there's an interesting part to that, which is whether the story is for you or not determines whether or not you give it value. And our story evolves and shifts as it moves along, and it becomes it is for everybody, but at different stages it's for some people more than it is for other people. And so we were really happy with that, because that the whole point of this project was about creating comedy that was going to connect a very specific community that had been divided together again. And so we are seeing that unfold, and then at the end, we're now seeing that evolve so that it becomes more of a broadcasting to a much broader international audience. And then we are obviously part of that audience. And that is just part of the journey. That's the part of the journey that we literally went on, that we physically went on, but it's also the journey of the film. There'll be moments that there are people laughing and you might not be laughing, but you can appreciate that it's funny for other people. And then there are moments that you will genuinely laugh because that joke was written for you and it's probably about you as well.
Got localized somehow. That's why they call it now
Yeah.
localization rather than translation. It's like you
Yeah.
want to localize it. But I'm sure also you had a lot of Arab communities that were attending the shows in the UK. So I'm sure there was continuous laughter, maybe not from the same aisle, but
Yeah, exactly. And
it
that was
still happened.
so nice, because the last joke that Allah is telling is from when he is living in Amsterdam, and he's making this exact point. So the joke is, when I was living in Palestine, I would make a joke and everybody would laugh. Everyone would find it so funny. They'd be laughing like constantly, whatever I did. Even if I moved my belly, people would laugh at it. And then I come to Europe and suddenly I've realized my stand up has become interesting comedy. And so people aren't laughing, they're mmming throughout the show. And
Surprising.
some guy once, and the joke comes from a real thing that happened, that somebody wrote to Allah to tell him that they had taken some time to process the jokes, and 4 days later they were now laughing at them. And, and
It
it
still
was,
worked. That's success. I'll take
yeah,
credit.
exactly. And that was like the cultural disconnect, is that like now it becomes something like interesting comedy, which is, for Northern Europeans, that we can definitely relate to that. We can understand that joke's about us being too intellectualizing everything.
Uh, that's actually very interesting. I'm glad that we actually discussed this because this is a real thing. Translating culture into something
Mm,
that can resonate worldwide. It's definitely a challenge, and I really appreciate all the effort that you put making sure that those jokes land
yeah.
somehow,
Yeah.
reach. Speaking of that, let's deviate a little bit from joking because I cannot really not talk about the world before and after October 7th. That's the new 9/11 now.
Mm,
And I'm sure your film stretched before and after. Are you able to tell me how, from your perspective, as someone who is British, but at the same time, you are working in Palestine, how did life change for you and for the crew from that very uh, miserable night that changed that and I think it will continue to change how the world looks like and the Middle East is not the Middle East that we know it anymore and I
mm,
think that's gonna continue to happen because of what happened on that night.
yeah.
Tell me, how did this affect you guys?
Yeah. So I think the impact was huge, because we had no idea it was coming, obviously.
Who did?
We
Right?
had no, yeah, we had no concept of what would evolve afterwards. So from that moment, it was just knowing that it was different in a sense, but not knowing what on earth was going to come. Um, but also from the perspective of making a film, we didn't want to give the impression that everything started on October 7th, which is, of course, where everybody's attention goes, right? There's this really long history of oppression and colonialism that dates for decades and decades before October 7th. So it became then a balance to make sure that we were doing justice to not just this current story, but to the history that this story takes place within. So from a kind of storytelling perspective, it was an immediate challenge. But from the perspective of the comedians, it threw up the whole question of whether or not comedy was something people wanted to be doing. Was it appropriate? Was it the right thing to do? Could they bring themselves to do it anymore? Some of them didn't want to do it anymore. Some of them did. Some of them thought it was the right thing. Some of them didn't. It really changed how people viewed what they were doing. And that obviously then changed the film. It changed the story. We thought we had finished the film at that point. It was almost entirely edited. We thought we were just filming the ending. And then we had to completely re-edit the story because the story had changed. And in terms of security, suddenly we were living in a very different environment. You know, it was when they came to London and they got stuck in London because the airspace was closed, we couldn't get them home, and eventually managed to get them home after many weeks. But then it was, you know, the West Bank was just radically shifting. The number of settlements being built ramped up like crazy. The number of checkpoints, the number of casualties. At a certain point, it got so dangerous because on the roads between towns, settlers were shooting at cars. You know, Allah Shahada was driving from one town to another, and his car got attacked by a group of settlers, and they shot at the car. And then that's when he realized his life was in danger and he had to leave. It wasn't safe for people to film anymore. It wasn't safe for people to move between cities and go with their camera equipment. We couldn't ask people to make those journeys anymore. Any filming that had to be done could only be extremely localized. And I mean, within, you know, people not
The
traveling
Iranian
more than,
way of doing films, yeah. Like
right,
hidden,
yeah,
yeah, like the Iranians
just
do films, hidden, no one
closed
can,
down.
yeah,
Yeah.
the
And
profile.
only if it was absolutely essential. But basically, filming stopped. Like, we couldn't do anymore. That was it. Like, safety issues were so severe, we just had to stop. And so there were massive, massive shifts. And even now, it's really difficult because there's very little work. You know, we made a really conscious choice to make sure that the team that we used, the post-production team, was based in Palestine because we wanted to make sure people had work. You know, Regash came to the UK to edit the film with us, and we edited it in the UK with him here. But aside from that, the color, the sound, the music, everything else, we were getting teams to do it that we're really now really struggling because there were no projects going there anymore. There was no production happening. There was no theatre happening. There was no creativity happening really. And it was very, very difficult for people to live. And so we wanted to send as much of the opportunity that way as we could. But it became, and it is now, it's impossible. People are living in an impossible situation. People feel like they can't leave their homes. There's not enough food. There's no money. There's no opportunity. There's no work. People are living the baseline minimum possible budget to live every day. In Gaza, it's absolutely unthinkable, the situation people are living in. It's so beyond what I thought human beings would tolerate. And it's been a real eye opener, I think, worldwide to see who are, you know, so questions posed to all of us to say, who are we as a people? Who are we as a society? And, you know, people said to me the weirdest things about making this film. You know, there are some people who are saying to me, like, oh, you know, maybe you shouldn't be working in this area, you know, like this is not such a great career move for you. Other people saying like, oh, this is great for you, like what an opportunity, like the whole world is talking about this. And I just couldn't believe either scenario. I just thought, on the one hand, how could anybody see what is happening now as a positive in any way? Like, it's just completely unthinkable what is happening right now. And on the other hand, this is one of the most important things that is happening in our world. So, if as storytellers, as people who are interested in the human condition, if we are not prepared to talk about one of the most important things that is going on in our world today that is affecting the human condition, not just in this specific part of Palestine, but is affecting our understanding of global politics around the world, if we're not prepared to talk about it because we're scared of our own careers, then what are we even doing in these jobs? Why are we here as storytellers? Why are we here telling stories about the world if we're not prepared to look at that issue? And it's, I say this a lot at festivals, particularly I said it at Sheffield Documentary Festival, talking to documentary make. I'm here talking to the industry. I'm talking to our industry, the commissioners, the financiers, the documentary makers, the producers, everybody. So many of you are not prepared to talk about this on your programs, on your networks, in your own storytelling, on your own social media, because you're worried about the backlash that you will get personally or the backlash that your network would get. What has happened? What has happened to all of us that's the reality that some people feel they're experiencing? And so the whole, since this point, the whole question of what we're doing and how we're doing it and should we be doing it, everything got thrown up into the air. And but for me, it just really came into sharp relief that, if you are here for humanity, you have to be here for all humanity. You don't get to cherry pick and choose whose humanity you're here for and whose you're not. Because guess what? If you feel like you're not being affected by this now and you feel like you don't need to stand up for it, well, your rights will be on the chopping block at some point.
You're next.
So,
Yeah, you're gonna be next. Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely, I do appreciate you. It's no secret that it's very hard, specifically for that, and that's part of why this topic lingered, the Palestinian situation, because most of the time they don't have access to Hollywood. They don't have access to filmmakers that can actually produce good quality films that can be shown and resonate with the rest of the world to understand what's going on for real, due to different constraints, whether you're not going to get funding, whether you're not going to get distribution, or that anyone that will talk about this topic will just be part of the new cancel culture. You're out. And it's no secret that many people already expressed that this happened to them and their careers got deeply affected by their political opinion on this matter. But also, I do appreciate the resilience of you and other filmmakers. I think things are easier in Europe to get funding. The messages now are much clearer. We see a lot of films. I think last year and this year, there's plenty of films that maybe changed the perspective of people that maybe never heard about it or never thought it was that bad, like The Voice of Hind Rajab, like Palestine 36, which goes back to the time where this actually happened. All That's Left of You, and those films really received very well attention from the European Film Cannes Film Festival, Venezia, all these festivals. And I think just pushing through resistance and not being scared to tell the story is what's gonna make it eventually work.
Yeah.
Yes, there will be people that will pay the price, but I think 2 3 years ago I would have never imagined a film like yours seeing the light and getting that much attention. A film like The Voice of Hind Rajab to win the biggest prize in Venice.
Yeah.
And I do appreciate all these filmmakers and what they do and their resilience and putting their careers on the break and getting the backlash. But hey, we're gonna do it anyways. And speaking of that, um, what do you hope that the American audience come out with after watching your film?
Mm. Oof. Listen, I have such a special feeling about the American audience in particular, and it's such a joy and a privilege to be able to be playing in San Francisco because, I don't know whether the American audience know how much is being kept from them. It's so difficult for these kinds of projects to find spaces in the US, to find distribution, to find networks, to find all of this stuff. So many of these stories are really struggling to find that audience, not because they're not great stories, but because there's so much political resistance to enabling these projects to find the light of day. And that's a huge problem because people don't know what they don't know. So if you don't ever hear this, if you only ever hear one story, you never hear this, you never see this experience, you never see Palestinians laughing, sharing a joke, laughing, loving one another with their families, with their friends, eating together, doing all of the normal human things that everybody does, that all families do. If you never see that, if all you see is destruction and pain and suffering, that's all you'll know. You'll never see this side to Palestinian culture, which is so beautiful and creative and artistic and intelligent and deeply, deeply imbued with culture and history and art and all of this incredible tapestry that exists within Palestinian culture. And this is coming from a complete outsider who only has scratched the surface, frankly, you know. Um, there is so much more to this story that people aren't getting. And when we have an opportunity to come to a festival that is proud and ambitious enough to be able to present these stories to an audience, it is such a privilege for us. So I really thank you guys for putting Palestine Comedy Club on screen and in the lineup. And I really hope more than anything that American audiences take a bit more of an understanding of humanity in Palestine, what exists, the complications that exist, of course, but also the extreme simplicity of laughter and joy, and how that can often only be reserved for some select groups of cultures, you know, and that this situation is about human beings. I hope that audiences fall in love with all of these people the way that I did. These are my friends. These are my dearest friends that we get to show to you, and to just see that life is the joy of life, the vibrancy of life. It should be shared by everybody. So I think there's a lot of information, there's a lot of nuance and understanding that comes through the film, but I hope more than anything people take some joy, because joy is the root of hope. We can't have hope without laughter and without joy and without the belief that there can be a better day and a better reality for people. So I hope that that's what this brings to people. And I hope that people reach out to us and tell us what they think, you know, reach out to us on Instagram or online, whatever. Tell us what you think. We would really love to hear it, because we're really trying to bring the film to Palestine a lot more. And it is, sorry, to the US a lot more. And it is so much more challenging than to take it to any other part of the world.
And it finally made it to the US, and I'm sure everybody will be excited about the film as much as I was excited about. And after I watched it and laughed and cried, and it just drew all kind of emotions. I'm sure it will resonate. Keep making films. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. I appreciate that you, the team. Send my regards to them, and hopefully we get to meet again
I
with
hope
new
so.
films.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much to everybody.
Thank you.